So I thought it would be good to have you, Jesse. You're a South Bend resident. You've been a longtime activist there, and you lived in Pete Buttigieg's South Bend, Indiana, when he was mayor, which included suing the city, which included a lot of run-ins with Pete Buttigieg, not physically, but activists, political. And I interviewed you on the ground there a couple of years ago, and what you told me was quite the striking difference compared to the media narrative about Pete. So I wanted to first start with, can you kind of describe for the audience that's never heard from you, what was your first interactions with Pete as when he was mayor and he became mayor in South Bend in 2011?
Well, Pete ran for, I think, state secretary or treasurer or something first, and that campaign was a big failure. And next thing I knew, Pete was running for mayor in South Bend, and his name had been just kind of thrown in there out of nowhere. And to be totally honest, I really didn't know who he was. And so when Pete got elected, I had taken a look at some of his campaign contributions. And what was alarming to me at that point was that a lot of the contributions came from very big money places, a lot of Obama backers, and he was getting pretty hefty campaign contributions from all over the United States, from the East Coast, the West Coast. And, that struck me as odd. I was kind of like, where'd this guy come from? And, why is a little, city of South Bend mayor getting all these major campaign contributions from these people? And so he got elected. And when he got elected, I had already initiated a lawsuit against the city of South Bend under the previous mayor, which was Stephen Lickey. And I tried to get a meeting with Pete Buttigieg to discuss what I had witnessed going on in our city. And needless to say, to no avail. You just couldn't get a face-to-face meeting. You really couldn't get phone calls back. And for a while, we referred to him as our ghost mayor. But I was suing the city for basically RICO violations for corruption. Sorry about the dogs in the background.
It's okay.
But anyway, I sent him a certified letter explaining to him, explaining to him, what I had uncovered, what I was, concerned with. And there was no response whatsoever, and it was kind of sad. And after that, we had a lot of other big things come up. The South Bend police tape issue was one of the biggest ones during that same time, around 2010 is when that came about. And so Pete kind of got tossed into that mess, and he basically didn't want to deal with that either. And it's cost our community several $1 million now in legal fees trying to get these police tapes played that supposedly have racist and possible criminal things that police officers were talking about on them. And here now it's 2021. So we're 11 years into this, and we still have not resolved it. That is still kicking around in our court system, and we're still spending money trying to get those tapes played that should have been public to begin with.
And that's been millions of dollars that have been spent trying to get those tapes released.
Oh, millions of dollars. And so when that first came about, several of us were concerned because all of a sudden Pete took off and went to, I believe, Afghanistan via the reserves or whatever, the Navy, I guess he's in. And so several people were trying to figure out, why he would just take off all of a sudden, when this was such a big deal, and it was really pulling at the heart of our community. And so to this day, people really aren't aware fully of whether he was called to duty, as he said, or whether it was a voluntary departure to Afghanistan for several months.
Mhm.
And, it concerned a lot of people that he wasn't here taking care of business. Fast forward a little bit, and Pete decides he's going to run for the DNC. Again, he's out campaigning, he's traveling, he's telling the community, I'm thinking about running for the DNC. No, I'm not going to do that. Maybe I will, just on and off. But he's nowhere to be seen. He's not in the community. He's traveling. So I had actually done a video back then called Traveling Man with a song in the background because, all we kept seeing on our news is, Pete out in other states campaigning. And I'm like, we've got so many issues here in our community that he needed to be here. And then came the presidential campaign. Again, he was out running and campaigning while still collecting his, nice salary here to be our mayor, but he wasn't here doing anything. So this, this pretty much happened during his entire tenure here. He was considered a ghost mayor. He didn't show up at city council meetings. I think the biggest reason for that is he didn't want to face the people that were there with questions. He would have these mayor's night out, but when you went to those, you had to put your name on a list, and those only lasted so long, and you would get a whopping 3 minutes to sit down and maybe have a face to face with him. And often at the end of that was, we'll look into your issue. And then you would get this nice little form letter, hey, thank you for bringing this to our attention, yada, yada, yada. I have several of those letters. And, just the things that went on here during his tenure. They ripped down 1,000 houses in 1,000 days. That was his big hurrah here in South Bend. And in essence, what that did was take a lot of affordable housing out of our community. And all that they've really put in place since then is high dollar housing. So it looked more like gentrification than anything else.
The homeowners that own those homes that were falling apart tried to work with Buttigieg, tried to work with his administration, maybe get some investment from the city to make the improvements that the city demanded. Buttigieg wanted nothing to do with that. They bulldozed them. They didn't even have the proper protocols in place when they bulldozed that. So you had a lot of debris and lead going into the community. And not besides one or a couple outlets, the mainstream media never showed any of that.
Yeah, not to mention, you have to think about it, when you start just bulldozing houses like that, and the neighborhood suffers, the people that live around those homes suffer, and your tax base is just eroded away to nothing. And on top of destroying those homes and things of that nature, we had a lot of businesses that were evacuating the area. So we had a lot of empty business fronts and store fronts, even downtown, in the heart of downtown. And you know you're eliminating a tax base by tearing these homes down, and then you turn right around and you're just doling out tax abatements to your buddies and your friends who are developers to build these large condos and townhomes. So there again, your tax base is taking a huge hit. So our taxes here took a big whack, and everything has increased here. Every time we turned around, our city water bills went up, our trash bills went up. Our property taxes are through the roof here. I believe St. Joe County as a whole is one of the highest tax counties in Indiana, as far as property tax go. And then they had a 12-year exemption from those property tax caps that the rest of the state of Indiana enjoyed, having their property taxes reduced to 1% and locked at 1%, while St. Joe and I believe Lake County was the only other one, got a 12-year exemption from that law. So us folks in these two counties paid higher taxes than anybody in the state for 12 years because our communities overspent, had all these bonds out there. So we got to pay for that on the backs of things. And there was so much more, man. The whole Smart Streets program, where they turned a lot of our what used to be one-way streets back into two-way streets. And from my understanding, um, they were changed to one-way streets decades ago, about 4 decades ago, because there was a study done and they determined it would be better to travel through the city that way, better for delivery vehicles, things of that nature. So they spent a lot of money having a study done because they wanted to change them back to two-way streets. My understanding was, and obviously, Jordan, you know how hard it is to get any kind of records.
Yeah.
Um, I heard that there was a study done, and the study came back that they really didn't recommend changing these streets back to two ways. And so they basically put that in the shredder and they paid another company to do a study. And that time the company came back with a favorable recommendation.